Thank you, Mr. Chilton. Our next witness is Mr. Bob Gray. He's the Executive Director of the Northeast Dairy Farmers Cooperatives. In this position, Mr. Gray is engaged on a wide array of issues affected dairy farmers in the Northeast. Mr. Gray has been a longtime advocate and representative of the dairy industry as he's based in Washington, D.C. area. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, Ranking Member Graves, and members of the committee. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to testify, and I apologize for coming in with my coat off, but I came over from a meeting in the Senate, and I was perspiring so badly I thought if I put my coat on I might faint, so I appreciate you not requiring that I put it back on.
Gentleman is excused.
Thank you. I am Bob Gray, and as the chairwoman mentioned, I represent 5 major dairy cooperatives in the Northeast, from Maryland to Maine. We have over 12,000 dairy family farm members. Our farms average about 125 in size. The Northeast region is very, very important from a dairy standpoint, as we produce 20% of the U.S. milk supply, 30 billion pounds of milk. It is a $50 billion business just in the Northeast. My mention of coming over on the Senate side, we were just in a meeting over there on and I think this is relevant to this legislation that the committee is having this hearing on today. The dairy industry is in the worst crisis it has faced in years and years and years. And we were at the meeting we were having in the Senate. In fact, Congressman Thompson was at this meeting, was to try to find ways that we could resolve the crisis that dairy farmers are facing. They are, many of them are exiting the business, and we're going to see a lot more leaving the business in the months ahead if prices do not improve. Now, our interest in this, I grew up on a dairy farm in upstate New York, in Cuyahoga County, New York. Actually, our farm was taken for a nuclear power plant siting, but the plant was never built because of 3 Mile Island. But I am familiar in the farm that I grew up in with issues regarding waterways and wetland areas. I would first like to say, though, that our dairy cooperatives, in starting out, really oppose S 787. Provisions in this measure will have a detrimental impact on dairy producers all across the country, not only the Northeast. This legislation would delete the term navigable from the underlying act, a term that appears in current law more than 80 times and is a key concept in the act to establish a practical geographical limit on the scope of the federal government's authority over water.
Mr. Gray, if
yes.
The gentleman suspend for a second, I just would like to clarify for the record, we are not considering any pending legislation,
right,
since there is no legislation that
okay.
has been introduced.
Okay. I just wanted to make the point, though, that the legislation that is under consideration in the Senate, we have concerns with. By deleting it, this bill would expand federal jurisdiction over certain water features that the Supreme Court decided were not subject to the Clean Water Act, and it is taking the unprecedented action in the 37-year history of the Clean Water Act to expand federal government jurisdiction beyond what many legal experts tell us is appropriate under the Commerce Clause of the Constitution. The term navigable waters for decades has described those waters that are clearly subject to federal control. It has been well settled in law that the federal regulatory authority over navigable waters is based on Congress's power to regulate navigation under the Commerce Clause. It is clear that Congress intended to use the term navigable waters when it passed the Clean Water Act in 1972. The conference report specifically states that Congress intends the term navigable waters be given its broadest possible constitutional interpretation, unencumbered by agency determinations which have been made or may be made for administrative purposes. In making the statement, the conference report about regulating navigable waters, Congress was exercising its authority under the Commerce Clause. Maintaining the term navigable waters makes it clear that while Congress has asserted its broad authority under the Commerce Clause, this jurisdiction is not limitless. Moreover, there are decades of cases that define the term. That is why the Clean Water Act and many other statutes use that term as a fundamental basis for identifying federal waters in contrast to state waters. By deleting the term navigable, The bill, the Senate bill, S-787, creates new questions and considerable confusion over the proper scope and limits of federal clean water jurisdiction under the Constitution and the Commerce Clause. As such, it will lead invariably to a whole new generation of litigation. That is why we have concerns for this legislation, and we wanted to pass them on to the committee. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to testify, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that the committee may have.